This week we're talking about the 6 characteristics of all living things. For your do it now 60-second writing, as an individual and as a table group, you just worked on coming up with those 6 characteristics. So let's try to go over them now. Let's go over them now together. So here, and let's actually do them one at a time here. Okay. So first of all, and they don't have to be in any particular order, of course, but this is just the order they are in the textbook. Cellular organization. Now, some of these, like this one, in the textbook, I think the way they word them is maybe a little bit confusing. So let's put them in words that make sense to us. So cellular organization, you can remember that, but to me, just saying cellular organization doesn't really tell me anything. To me, more important is this, that all living things are made of one or more cells. So if you wanted to remember it, all living things are made of one or more cells. That's the important idea right there. The smallest living things are only one cell, unicellular or single-celled, and others are multicellular, like human beings and puppies and kittens, actually made of trillions of cells. And by being made of trillions of cells, we can have different tissues like hair and blood and muscles and bone and that sort of thing. Single-celled living things obviously are just one cell, so they don't have different types of tissues. Okay, so cellular organization. Make sense? Okay. Again, made of one or more cells might be an easier way to think about it. So the next is chemicals of life. And this is another one. If you just remember chemicals of life, that may or may not mean anything useful. So what I would remember is that all living things are made of similar chemicals. All living things are made of similar chemicals. You're like, okay, well, how am I going to remember chemicals? They're easy because those chemicals are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, water. What does that sound like? It sounds like food because it is food. Sounds like your nutrition label because it is. You are what you eat. You have to eat carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to make more of you, to grow bigger, to repair. So chemicals of life. And also very importantly, so important, I would probably put it actually in a separate category, but all living things, have DNA. Didn't really work, did it? All living things have DNA. So DNA, obviously, we haven't talked about yet. Does anyone know anything about DNA? What it does? Everyone got that? Don't worry, we're going to spend lots of time in the second quarter talking about it. But basically, it's the blueprints for you. Each of your cells has chromosomes, and on those chromosomes are genes. Those genes are made up of DNA. So DNA tells your body what to do. Curly black hair, straight blonde hair, what color your skin is. It tells your cells to, make more cells or to do whatever they're supposed to do. So all living things, and to me, this is all living things have DNA. Every single living thing has DNA. That alone is a very unique thing. It's a complex molecule that has the directions for you being you. And those are the traits that are passed on from your parents to you. Okay, so chemicals of life, all living things are made of the same chemicals, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and all living things have DNA. All right, thing 3, energy use. All living things need energy. They must have an energy source. Now, the confusion here, sometimes people think of it as energy use, that things use energy, like jumping up and down and moving. Well, that's true, but the characteristic is that they have to get that energy from somewhere. So all living things need an energy source. And yesterday, when we kind of brainstormed ideas, what were some of the things that people came up with that are actually energy use that we think of that living things need? Yeah. Yeah, the fact that we eat food and we breathe oxygen. Almost always when I ask people to brainstorm, they say living things breathe. But that's not actually one of the characteristics, but the whole reason we breathe is to get oxygen to break down the food. Because what do plants do? Where do plants get their energy? The sun plus carbon dioxide, they make food to get energy out of. So some living things get energy from the sun and carbon dioxide. Some living things use food and oxygen, but living things must have an energy source in order to get that energy for their cells to grow and muscles to move and all that stuff. Okay? Energy use. The next of the 6 characteristics is response to surroundings. That's pretty straightforward. So all living things respond to their environment. If it's too hot, they seek shelter. If they live in the desert, they might sleep during the day and be active at night. If there is danger, they run away. Plants, do plants react to their surroundings? Sure, how do plants react to their surroundings? Yeah, yeah, plants grow towards the sun. And which way do their roots grow? Down into the ground because of different chemicals cause them to grow into the ground. Yeah, right. So if as the roots are growing, if there's water in one direction, the roots will grow towards the water. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, and then you have plants that actually respond to touch. Some plants, the leaves will close when yep, like a Venus flytrap. There's another one that just has big leaves, and when you touch it, the leaves fold up. Um, Plants also respond to the days are getting shorter. There's fewer hours of daylight. That's one of the ways that plants know that it's time for the plants to lose their leaves and be dormant for the winter. So they respond to their environment. Okay, anyways, respond to their environment, which includes many different things. Okay, next, growth and development, which is not just growing and getting bigger, but having a life cycle. So they're born, they mature, they die. As we talked about characteristics of living things, in many classes, people say, well, if it's alive, then it has to be able to die, basically. Some things have a very short life cycle, some things live for many years or decades, or in the case of some trees, hundreds of years. Life cycle. Okay, so she says there's a jellyfish that can basically live forever. You know, that's interesting. I'll have to look that up. Some jellyfish, like the Portuguese man-o-war, are actually a colony of living things. So, but that's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that. Right. Yes. So jellyfish, but I know they do have, there is a life cycle. So even if the life, that's interesting. We'll have to look that up. Jellyfish, there is a life cycle in terms of, see, this is the adult jellyfish. Gotcha. So that might be a little bit. And the other thing too is like single-celled organisms, bacteria, they divide into two, right? That's how they reproduce. So does one of them die, right? If they keep multiplying, they keep making more, but they may or may not, you know, does that count as two new babies and the adult died, or does it count as it just made more? So, alrighty, good point. So let's take a look at so it has to have a life cycle where there's it changes, it doesn't just grow bigger. Maybe it doesn't exactly have to die, especially it lives like a colony. Yes. Mm-hmm. Nice. So it goes. really, 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 really slowly. Nice. Aspen trees also and sumac trees, things like that. When you see a whole grove of the trees, they're actually all connected underground by the roots. So you could say that's all one living thing. Okay, let's wrap this up and then we'll go back to more examples. Reproduce. All living things are able to reproduce. All living things must be able to make more of their own species. So you can't have just one living thing that is the only one of its kind. That just doesn't really work in real life. Exactly, because then eventually it would be no more. Okay, now I've just handed out to you your assignment that we're going to work on over the next couple days. And this is what it looks like. It is called, Miss U West calls hers Get a Life. That's kind of funny. I always just called mine Invent a Life. But that's fine. Please follow along. As you see here, you're going to turn in this yellow sheet with your life form. It acts kind of, or with your project. It's basically a grading rubric, a checklist. You need to have this so you know you did all the right requirements. Looking up at the top here, using what you've learned about the characteristics of living things. Oh, and it says in the scientific naming system. We're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow, so don't worry about this yet. But we will talk about that on Wednesday. You'll show how a living thing you know of demonstrates these characteristics, or design your own life form, which is what a lot of people end up doing because it's a lot of fun. Let me go over this and then I'll show you some examples. So the requirements, you're going to show how the life form demonstrates all 6 characteristics of living things and describe a bit about each. So made of cells, obviously all living things are made of cells. So as you're describing made of cells, basically you're just going to say, is it single-celled or multi-celled? So this part of the assignment doesn't have a huge amount of detail. You're just saying, this is a single-celled living thing. It's very tiny. Or this is a multicellular complex dragon, and it's huge. The second thing, hang on just a second. Let me get through these, and then I think then we'll be able to answer some questions. Sense and respond. How does it respond to its environment? So you're going to describe, like I was mentioning before, does it hibernate in the winter? Does it live in the desert and hide underground and hunt at night? Does it, is it very secretive? Is it a predator and goes out and hunts? How does it use its senses to deal with things? Reproduce. I've had some years when people said, reproduce, oh my gosh, I have to describe. No, you just have to say, how does it make more of itself? Does it clone itself? Does it have seeds? Does it find a mate? Does it mate once during its lifetime? Does every 2 years it has a litter of 6 kittens? I don't know. How does it make more of itself? Made of similar chemicals. This, of all of the things, is the one that you're not going to do a whole lot of describing, because you're going to say, yep, it's made of similar chemicals. It has DNA. But maybe you could also then say, that DNA is responsible for what it looks like. And then tell what it looks like. Does it have fur, teeth, skin, slime? I don't know. Give you a chance to describe things. Use energy. Where does it get its energy? So is it a carnivore, an herbivore, omnivore, decomposer, predator, prey? Does it do photosynthesis like a plant? And then growth and development, life cycle. So with this, tell a little bit about the life cycle of this organism. So does it live for 100 years? Does it live for 1 day? Right? So that's this. So then the last part, and then I'll give you some examples, that's basically using those 6 characteristics and describing. Then the second part here, you have to have a picture, and I'll show you some examples. Your picture, you might draw it yourself. Projects like this give you a chance to do what you like to do best. So if you're good at drawing, draw it. If you're not good at drawing, cut out a picture from a magazine. Cut and paste. Photoshop. Okay? Um, name and classification. Again, we're going to talk about this part tomorrow, so don't worry about that yet. And habitat. We have talked a lot about ecosystems. So not just the living thing, but you need to talk about the ecosystem, where this thing lives. Where does it find its food, water, and shelter? It might live in a pond. It might not. Maybe it lives in the fire swamps of not, well, Narnia, yes, but I was going for the Princess Bride. Where's Princess Bride take place? Yes, Florin. And so maybe you could describe an RUS, a rodent of unusual size. All right, I'm going to take some questions and show you some examples.